had some slides, but I won't share them. I just prefer to have a more direct engagement with you. I know it's been a long marathon, so I really appreciate everyone that's stuck around. All right, so yeah, like Mary was saying, birthing Earth within, Holotropic Midwives and the Twice Born. So I'm hoping that we have some time for Q&A. So I'm not going to talk too much. Just read here 1 sec. All right. So the idea that I want to convey to you today, I think is simple. And it is, given the circumstances that we're facing today as a human family, no less than a profound spiritual rebirth is needed. And I believe that that process is perhaps even invited or conjured, constellated by the earth itself. So if, in my mind, if we want to get serious about it, that's the invitation. And that's what I have here for you today. And in order for that to make it a little bit more relatable, user-friendly, I'm going to use the metaphor of birth. That in one way or another, just by definition, we've all gone through it. We're here, right? Okay, so someone like Jung says, the world today hangs by a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. It's a classic of Jung, right? And what do you think he means by that? Well, many things. One of the things I believe he's trying to say there is that it is at this time, because of various evolutionary historical forces, that the world is kind of a mirror for the, especially the industrialized psyche. And what we're seeing out there is truly a gift, so to speak. Why? Because it's finally out there. It's finally out there, and the sad news is that it's causing havoc. It's causing what some people, great unraveling, just truly trouble. And I want to just name a couple of things. When I say we, I'm going to say we a few times, and it's not the royal we. I'm going to say, yeah, the human family, but it's primarily the industrialized human. Because what I have to say today does not apply to indigenous folk and others, really. They have their own thing going, and I'm not the one to say what they have to do or not. Trouble with that, though, is that this planetary scale psyche mirroring back at us is that those folks, along with the rest of the Earth community members, are implicated. And I think that's part of the conundrum. So planetary apocalypse, and that's like thank goddess apocalypse, that means of revelation, and that's what I was naming, that is finally here, you know, the unveiling, kind of like a near-death experience of the planet herself, that may be required to enter another of her developmental stages. One of my favorite sort of images is that of a collective initiation, which is very close to that of birth that I'm going to present to you today. So it's one of the most inviting or alluring sort of metaphors for us to look through at the planetary moment, in my eyes, a collective initiation. And that for some entails the coming of a new actual age, which basically means like this tipping point, a wellspring of cultural and spiritual renaissance that took place about, 2,500 years ago. Started there and lasted for a few centuries. Some people say that it is happening now again, and it has the similar potential and capability of informing the deep structures of the human psyche and the orientation and direction that is available to us. So then we say, well, there's like an urgent shift in consciousness, and it'll take us, maybe many lifetimes. So what is consciousness and all of that? So what I want to really focus on is, okay, there's four chief metaphors that I often use by this visionary called Wayne Elgin. He's from the Bay Area. And I'm going to focus, like I said since the beginning, in one of those. So one, humanity's growing up, finally. You know, from the path of adolescence, sort of like stagnation, of like lack of responsibility, and just like self-concern, not caring for others, and how the toys that we have at our hands are not really for us to play with at this time. So this is part of what's causing a little bit of the trouble. That's one metaphor, that's one story. Makes sense, especially from an ecopsychological perspective and the arrested development that is suggested by various authors to be kind of like the chief or one of the chief sources of this disconnection between the human and the rest of life, right? So the second one, the global brain is waking up. Not gonna say a lot about that one as of now, but it is connected with the noosphere, the envelope of mind, the evolutionary perspective. Some people associate that with the rise of technology, and that's a lot. There's a lot to say there. AI and all of these things. Again, from an ecopsychology perspective, complex one there. The totemic self, the technological self, as it's often put forth, I guess need to encounter sort of like a sacred marriage type of situation, which I hope it happens, you know, in the chambers of Earth. Yeah, but I just don't have time for that one as much. The third one is the one that I will be exploring. The planet is giving birth. And this is an interesting one. I'll talk about it in a second. The fourth one is the sacred feminines re-emerging. I think in my mind, I'm going to tackle those two in this presentation a little bit. But here's the deal. The invitation for you today is that the planet is giving birth. So how would that look like? Well, one of the ways that for me shows up is that the planet, this meta kind of organism, is perhaps going through pain, the laboring. In Spanish, you know, like giving birth, it's often said as dar a luz, to give light. So in that process of giving light, there's often a lot of struggle. I don't know if you've witnessed a birth, now that you've have more of a conscious awareness. So I was there. I think personally this is not the chief inspiration for this talk, which is the birth of my daughter. And before she came into this world, the midwife, she was like, oh yeah, she would leave me there with Yari's mom, and I'm like, okay. And she was in a lot of pain, and you know, I'm supposedly Reiki master, like I put my hands, okay, I'm gonna, and I've never felt so much energy when I've tried to do that, when it was close to coming, my daughter, and like I got scared. I was like, oh, wait, amongst many other things that happened. I was so surprised by the life energy, I guess, that was present there. And so basically, the urgent shift in consciousness in this, seen in these ways, how can we advocate, negotiate, navigate the emergence of the new? That's another way to put it, like this birth of a human that is a little bit more appeased and attuned with what's going on around. And so I'm gonna have to share a poem here because Goethe is so much more eloquent than I am. So the mysteries of rebirth here. Of course, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Maybe we've heard that one many times. But here's what Goethe has to say. Tell a wise person or else keep silent, because the masked man will mock it right away. I praise what is truly alive, what longs to be burned to death. In the calm water of the love nights, where you were begotten, where you have begotten, a strange feeling comes over you when you see this silent candle burning. Now you're no longer caught in the obsession with darkness, and a desire for higher love-making sweeps you upward. Distance does not make you falter. Now, arriving in magic, flying, and finally insane for the light, you are the butterfly and you're gone. And so long as you haven't experienced this, to die and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on the dark earth. So what I'm suggesting here is that most of us are only troubled guests. And then there's an invitation into maturity, into the next adventure, to really birth ourselves anew. That biological birth is not enough. That's one of the takeaways here. That not just by being in this world, and then we're okay now. That's done? No. The mysteries of rebirth. There's various metaphors to go with that one. So different understandings like lateral, cyclical, depth and vertical, entrainment, transcendence, embodiment. All these are sort of angles that we can tackle the mystery of birth and rebirth. And I'm going to be focusing on 2 or 3 of these that point at the sort of what in religious studies, I guess it's centered as or referred to as conversion, primarily, you know, may have some social, difficult points, cultural at this moment, but the essence, you know, I'm hoping that by using the metaphor of birth is going to become clear. And of course, someone like William James, Otto Rank have in the Western psychological tradition really focused on the trauma of birth. I call it the mystery of birth here because, you know, there's many layers to it. But basically the idea again here is that the death rebirth archetype, I'm focusing on these sort of the creative expressions of this process because I often tend to focus on the other side. But you'll see that there's a saying that from the eyes of eternity, death and birth or rebirth are the same. So I'm implying with what I'm telling you and suggesting today, I'm implying that in order for that to happen, one needs to die before one's death comes too. Just a little bit of more of a sobering path that I wanted to share more of the creative aspects with you today. Okay, so of course today and this week is a special week and days in the Christian traditions and others, and this is refers to as the Paschal mystery, passion, death, and rebirth of the Christ figure, right? Which is what actually made that figure the Christ. And some would say that maybe this is a similar process that the earth is going through at this time. The crucifixion of earth by the diluted industrial mind. But there's a background here of basically all traditional rites of passage of pre-industrial communities have these, of course, just rituals and various ways of meaning making and allowing for these transitional phases to take place in the community and the members, whereby a profound both ontological and epistemological orientation or reorientation takes place to the level where the identity of the community or individual is completely, you know, sometimes completely transformed. And they are welcomed back with this new dimension or renewed version of who they are, right? The mystery religions of the Greco-Roman communities, they're all also based on this death, rebirth, mystery, organized around that sacrament that is often manifest in various ways of ecstatic and challenging and terrifying and amazingly beautiful experiences. So here, what I want to highlight with that is the experiential dimension of the invitation of rebirth. No one else can do it for us. And then if we take this seriously, then from an ecopsychological perspective, I feel that's why I was saying that, oh, it's great that it's finally happening. Because if the earth herself, I'm going to use that pronoun, be conjuring that for us now, the invitation is basically, it's breathable these days, you know? For those that, you know, have eyes to see and ears to listen, this may be a good invitation these days to heed the call. Again, someone like Jung says that nature herself demands a death and a rebirth. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, finally, you know, these manuals of dying, of course, we know that they're manuals for living, good living. Buen vivir, or like just like in the blossoming life of listening to the daimon and the soul. It says, I have the power to be born a second time. So time and time again, I'm not going to go into much of the detail about this, but you'll find the invitation of that there's something that we're missing on life if we don't undertake this process. And then there's, like I was saying, various traditions, spiritual and otherwise, organized basically around this principle or this invitation. So with this comes the encounter with the numinous, almost invariably in one way or another. And again, Jung would say that he's not interested in treating neurosis, but in facilitating the approach to the numinous, because it is the numinous that heals. So if that's the case, then the birth mystery and the invitation toward rebirth would encounter, we ourselves would make available to the numinosity of ourselves and earth. And the trouble there, I'm going to begin wrapping up and hopefully you have plenty of time. The trouble with that encounter is that hardly any one of us would consciously choose surrendering, because it would entail just a letting go, a dying, that we've so cherishly attached, and our ideas about things and our persona and just about everything, what we think of the world is, our place in it. We are invited to loosen that. And again, from an ecopsychological perspective, I read that primarily as a detachment from the history or the story of a separate sense of self. It's tricky, but the rebirth would bring about or infuse this fresh air of the story of interdependence. But that would only come like in an embodied, vivid way through the dark night process of surrendering and the spiritual emergency that would ensue, and the profound reorientation there and the activation of the, and some people refer to as like the inner healer of this self-organizing capacity of the psyche. So, to begin trying to make a little bit more sense about this. So this is Rick Tarnas. I believe that humankind has entered into the most critical stages of a death-rebirth mystery. In retrospect, it seems that the entire path of Western civilization has taken humankind and the planet on a trajectory of initiatory transformation into a state of spiritual alienation, into an encounter with mortality on a global scale, from world wars and holocaust to the nuclear crisis, and now the planetary ecological crisis. It seems that we are all entering into something new, a new development, a crisis of accelerated maturation, a birth, and we cannot really know where it is headed. And that last line there, we can not really know where it's headed. And if we kind of get ourselves familiar with the principles here of the death rebirth process or spiritual transformation, if we would know that we were going to make it, by definition, that wouldn't catalyze the actual transformation that's needed. Uncertainty, not knowing, perhaps really not making it and crashing, that needs to be in place in order for the psychic landscapes to really maybe release or finally come to terms with their own place amidst a wider ecosystem. Okay, so in my mind, we can make sense of this by way of the intersection of two contemporary maps of two towering, pioneering figures that I deeply admire both, Joanna Macy and Stan Grof. So they both have profound cartographies of transformation. On the one hand, Joanna has the spiral of the work that reconnects with 4 stages. And I believe you did some good work today. Thank you, Callum, around that. And then Stan, on the side, has also a map, amongst many, of 4 basic perinatal matrices that have served as a map for deep transformation and navigating all kinds of non-ordinary states of consciousness. So in bringing these two into dialogue, I feel that the reason why I'm attracted, or one of them, to both of these people and to both of these technologies is because of the experiential component ingrained there. There's an invitation of, okay, this is not only for academic, exercise and for our own benefit, it's truly an invitation for us to step in to the process. So here's what Joanna says. Seeing through the fiction of a separate self, one passes through the 0 point. She's referring to, because such a 0 experience is a kind of birth, generative of new worlds. It is fitting that she would lead us through it. It is fitting that she who lead us through it is seen as genetrix and mother. So she's referring to Mother Earth, and she's referring to the, of course, selflessness in the Buddhist tradition and the interdependence that ensues from that. And basically that through the work that reconnects, we may engage in this sort of equanimous 0 point situation where we are ourselves the birth child of this mother emptiness, I guess. So I'm gonna stop in 1 second. So this is navigated through 4 stages of the spiral. Basically, it's gratitude, pain, fresh and ancient eyes, and going forth, or integration. And then stands 4 basic perinatal matrices. Basically, they don't align exactly. This is where slides would have been handy, but they don't align exactly with the 4 stages of the spiral of the work that reconnects. But they speak to something very in similar dimensions. So we were one day in the land of medicine Buddha over there in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I asked Joanna, hey, I noticed that the spiral seems to be resting in a deeper structure of transformation. Akin to the hero's journey, to the three phases of traditional rites of passage, as Arnold van Gennep, many other, and she just looked at me and laughed and walked away. So, okay. I took that as a yes, implicit, but you tell me. But basically, so what I can say about the four basic perinatal matrices is that the idea of the perinatal awareness, around natal, around birth, it's from an ecopsychological perspective, we can read that basically as the hinge between the personal and the transpersonal. Because in Grof's map, there's at least 3 dimensions of the psyche, right? Personal, perinatal, and transpersonal. And the middle one, perinatal, it's kind of like a bridge connecting both. So in a similar spirit, for example, someone like Tito Rosak, the origins of ecopsychology, would say that basically ecopsychology is sort of like a psychopomp project, bridging and weaving worlds together, primarily the person and the planet. So the perinatal dimension, I feel that it does a wonderful job at also helping us see that link, but at the same time inviting us basically to a rebirth process. So this leads me to the final idea, which is then of the holotropic midwives. So the idea here is that the process of spiritual birth and rebirth excuse me, activates, as I was naming before, this innate intelligence of the psyche, and we could say that conjures. That's since the get-go I said, like, well, maybe it's an invitation from the earth herself. And because maybe I'm assuming that that deep intelligence that is put to test time and time again in experiential processes, such as the work that Reconnects and holotropic breathwork and others, maybe that's activated in the Earth community as a whole. And then maybe we can listen to that. And so it is that big, wise, caring function inviting us to dance with her. So Michael Mead said something like, midwives once assisted the newborn into this world and helped the newly dead onto the other world. Willingly or not, we are all attendants at the funeral of the last era and the birth of the next. We are all midwives, placing the shroud on a body soon to disappear and anointing the next birth with our prayers, fears, denials, and hopes. And finally, Joanna again. But if we let it, and she's talking about our anxieties, our fears, or what she refers to as pain for the world. But if we let it, the narrow cul-de-sac can turn into a birth canal, pressing and pushing us through the darkness of pain until we are delivered into what? Love seems too weak a word. It is, as St. Paul said, the glory to be revealed in us. It stirs in us now. So I wanted to put together here the holotropic means moving toward wholeness as this innate intelligence of the found in the deep recesses of the human mind, which is attuned or in concert or shares the same ground as that of the earth. So moving toward wholeness would be engaging a process of spiritual rebirth, of giving ourselves the opportunity and the permission to yet again be born. But the tricky thing here is that we are both the midwives and the thing at least in the surface, that wants to be born. And I find that very paradoxical. Exactly. So, how do we navigate that one? I'm going to give you a hint. One way to do that is to conceive of our deep identity as Earth already, and she's the one that is overseeing the process. And at the end of the birth canal, on the other side of the process, we're going to perhaps more fully embody that. So I spoke like 9 more minutes than I was hoping. So I don't know, do we have time for questions?
Well, thank you. Well, I think we can take about 7.5 minutes for
Fantastic.
questions. This means people staying a little bit longer, but everybody has been,
Even just 5 is good,
even 5, okay.
if
So-
there's any.
Are there any questions in the room?
Thank you, Adrián. This is very helpful. I'm curious, it sounds like a lot of this is being with the mystery and the unknown. So I'm curious if you have any inklings of or signs of pregnancy, or if this is a birth metaphor, or, you know, there's sort of, it's unseen, but do you sense any growth that is happening in the womb that we might be able to tend to as midwives?
Oh, I see. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I believe so. You know, in the good days, I feel that when I look around, and of course, from an ecopsychological perspective, I feel that the template it's all around us, like it's happening all the time, and that we're invited time and again to relinquish that supremacist tendency and decenter the conversation, so these other voices kind of come, as you know, come rushing in and allow for the sort of carry through the birth canal or the different parts of ourselves. So I do feel that like I was saying, in my good days, I see it all around. In my not so good days, no. And I feel that because in the not so good days, I'm just so narrowly focused and self-ruminating about what was and what could be, and not actually more in tune with the real. So when and the real being like the sort of like an Aldo Leopold situation of like the biotic community, you know, what is of benefit to the mountain, to light, that's what matters. That's the true, that's the right thing. And so when I hear folks, including myself, oh, the world is a dumpster fire, which world? I know that, you know, on a global scale, that was my initial argument. But the world of the other than human, I don't want to say that there's no suffering there. There's a lot of it. But in spite of that, what I'm saying that in spite of that, bless you, there's so much beauty going on in so many teachings, and so the invitation there remains. Yeah, is that helpful? Yeah.
So Jonathan, do you have anyone in the chat?
Well, we have Will here who would like to ask a question. So please come on in, Will.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adrián. That was really beautiful, and hopeful, inspiring. I on my bad days, I think it could go the other way. But I'm with you. I intuit this rebirth happening, and it's heartening. And we need some heartening signs these days. Um, I was wondering, my sense is that um, if there's a process of a greater rebirth, it's taking place in small everyday rebirths. Um, in more ordinary ways. And I wondered if you had thoughts about, or even maybe, could you share like one lived example, real life example, just in everyday nitty-gritty life, where there's an encounter that's actually a rebirth encounter?
Thanks, Will. Yes, I can. So, yeah, in my mind, I didn't refer to like the species ego death and the dark night of the species soul. Like they would all point at that great potential rebirth that is at the verge or is taking place. And at the personal scale, my size version of the situation, a lot of the time, just following the main inspiration here for this talk, is that the many times I have to let go of the plans that I have for a day, what we should do, shouldn't do, at what time we should move, when I'm hanging out with a 5-year-old human creature. The many times I need to compose the various ideas about a dad and a human and how would that look like amidst what's taking place in front of me and trying to tend her. That would be, it's been very humbling for me, and the process of just a handful of years now that has been going on has dramatically shifted my perception of the world, and the version of Adrián that you're seeing today is doing 20 things that the version of Adrián 6 years ago couldn't have ever imagined that he could do. Just the superpower of patience and the and the example that I was telling you, Will, and everybody. For me, that's very hopeful. That's very inspiring because I've experienced it in my heart, in myself, like, oh wow, that's a given now these days for me. And I couldn't even conceive of it before. I couldn't find the value. I didn't know why I was going for it, and I didn't, look at that. So is that helpful, Will?
I think that's a really awesome example. As a fellow dad, I will say that's a great example. And it continues at age 17 and 19 at least, I can testify.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see, I think we should probably move on. So let's think.